I've heard a lot of, essentially, I'll call them chef's tales as opposed to wives' tales, but like I've had people
I like that.
I've had like certain people explain to me that it's essentially it's like a racist understanding of it, that like Chinese restaurants back in the day would in San Francisco and New York would pop up and people would go home feeling sick and tired, but ultimately it was just from how much sodium is in the food in general that just makes you drowsy and stuff like that. And a lot of people.
They never say that about turkey. Today on the show, we're joined by Chef Chris Krinsky, who grew up in Mexico and first started serving ramen out of his parents' garage. That humble hustle turned into Ramen Del Barrio, his North Austin spot where Mexican flavors and Japanese techniques come together in surprising and delicious way. Well, Chris, welcome to the Taqueria Sin Nombre. What do you think?
It's beautiful. Thank you for having me.
I feel like the vibes are there. Like when I go to Ramen Del Barrio and I see this too, I was like, we got to do something.
It's warm, it's comforting, it's rustic. It's just supposed to invite you into it. Yeah.
That's right. That's
Absolutely.
right. Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on to. Just people tripping over equipment. That's all.
We're so excited to be here.
Well, thank you for coming. Let's introduce people to Ramen Del Barrio straight off the bat, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's like this fusion of cultures, pero, tell me where did it come from?
So I grew up in Mexico, right, as you mentioned, and when I came to Austin, I started working in Japanese restaurants. So from a disciplinary standpoint, I'm pretty strictly familiar with Japanese kitchens, but like every single restaurant in this country, regardless of what cuisine it's cooking, it's run by Latinos, right?
Yeah.
So along the way, I'm meeting plenty of tias and abuelitas, and I'm like, hey, I'll pay you, teach me how to make carnitas, how do you roll your masa and all that. Got to learn those things along the way, and just by being around the people that you get to meet. But really, when I was doing Ramen Garage, it was, this project that was entirely loose, no real parameters. It wasn't a business, so I didn't have any expectations. It was really just a testing grounds for me to do whatever I want. And I remember the first time I really heard about birria ramen, and I was like, people are out there doing it, right?
Yeah.
And I go out to the trucks, and I'm like, oh, you guys are just making delicious birria consomme, and then you're pouring it over your tapatio instant noodles. And I'm like, you know what? That is a beautiful evolution of food through the street casual environment, but that's not what I'm doing.
Right.
I'm boiling tonkotsu 30 hours over, over the course of 2 days to get this creamy broth and the Japanese ramen structures there. So I was like, okay, so it hasn't been done yet, right? Maybe it can be done. So the very, very first bowl I did was the menudo tonkotsu. And I think it had probably just been that very same week that I had menudo. At like Taco More over on Riverside. And
Taco More? Taco More.
Taco More.
No, that's still, nobody knows.
I know.
It's a mystery.
Yeah. I'll go with whatever you want to call it. All right. It's your show. So I probably had menudo, and I had the disappointment of understanding what birria ramen really was all in the same week. So that's probably where my mind was at. And I was like, let me see if I can do this. And I served it a few times, but ultimately it was just a one-off bowl. Ramen Garage was Japanese ramen. It was whatever I wanted to do on any given day. And then, Ramen Garage kind of blew up, and somebody approached me with an opportunity to open an actual restaurant. I kind of got this blind interview with an angel investor, didn't tell me who they were, just came into the garage, right? And I treated them like I treat all my guests. The next day I get a phone call. They're like, hey, this is who I really am. I have an opportunity for you. Do you have something that you could do? Could you open a concept? And at this point, I'm 24 years old, and I'm like, absolutely not. Like, I have no idea what I would do, but I wasn't gonna say no either, because I had watched my dad be his own boss and entrepreneur his whole life, and I knew, I'm pretty bad at taking orders from other people, so I knew eventually I was gonna have to be able to do my own thing, and I knew at the time, or at least where my confidence was, that my true ability to produce traditional Japanese ramen wasn't necessarily where I wanted it to be. And as a young guy, I was like, I don't know if I want to go out there and compete with other ramen shops that are already established and putting out a fantastic product. And, perhaps that was just a lack of confidence at the time. But I know that my ramen game has evolved drastically from Ramen Del Barrio's conception till now. But I figured, what if I do something truly unique that sets me apart and becomes something that cannot be compared symmetrically.
Sure.
You don't think of just ramen when you think of Ramen Del Barrio.
Yeah.
And it's a novelty experience. You go there for something that hasn't necessarily been done in that way before. And that protected me. Because honestly, like when I think about the first like 6 months of Ramen Del Barrio, I'm like, damn, I wish I could take those back. Because there were so many learning, like going from making ramen for 20 people once every 2 weeks in an environment where I'm not even charging my guests, to being a professional business serving 200 to 300 bowls on any given day is a drastic change.
Yeah, that's huge.
And I remember, you know, some of the mistakes I had never worked with an actual industrial pasta boiler. Again, I was a line cook before this, so many little things that I could take back if I would. But knowing where I am now, like, the game has evolved so much for me. And I would love to like just open a traditional Japanese ramen shop one day, knowing now that the core of Ramen Del Barrio is like excellent quality Japanese ramen.
Nice. So this idea was born out of like this, you know, your experience in working in Japanese restaurants.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what was the thing that you know, you talked about tonkotsu and
carnitas brought together.
Right? So like what gave you that idea, that concept of like, hey, carnitas and menudo and pozole and all these like staples of Mexican menus. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so what was the kind of that idea that like, oh, this is how I can stand out, or this is how I'm gonna blend it.
Right. So
like cacahuates japoneses.
Yeah, and I actually I have a thing about cacahuates japoneses for you later. But this is so, you know, again, they approached me to open Ramen Del Barrio in like October of 2022, and we opened February of 23. And from that time, when they approached me, the menudo tonkotsu was the only bowl I had ever done in the Mexican spectrum of fusion ramen. But I knew that if I were to open a concept around that, I would need multiple bowls. I would need, you know, when you have a fusion concept, any restaurant really, you're trying to project this idea. And you're trying to do it through multiple facets: the food, the visuals, the music, you know, all of it. And the more niche your concept is, the more that empowers you to explain it, and the more thoroughly explained your vision is, the more real it becomes to the people in it, which is why the decorations at Ramen Del Barrio matter so much. Why I specifically choose vulgar rap and ska and rock, right? And things that are specifically projected.
You mean E. The young kids call it E for explicit.
Heard, you know, all of those things brought together. So the carnitas and the tonkotsu, you know, the standard bowl of tonkotsu ramen is going to present this creamy, thick, viscous white broth. And I knew that the menudo was not that. It's red.
Right.
I needed to showcase in one of these bowls that we were going to be putting out this perfectly emulsified, creamy pork broth. And when you think about that, you're kind of getting back down to simplicity. So then I look at the Mexican side of things. I'm like, what is the most simple thing, yet obviously intricate and complex thing that Mexican culture does with pork, and that's carnitas.
Carnitas.
Right? You know, it's an art form at this point. I have some chef friends back in Mexico that have broken it down to like a scientific method of making carnitas, and it's really, really cool. And there's so many different ways to go about it, but it's truly, you know, I love to talk about it. But I think tonkotsu and carnitas are kind of like the culminations of what two societies have done with pork within their own spectrums, right?
So for our listeners that may not be too familiar with tonkotsu, give us a definition of that, and then for some of us that think that they can make carnitas on an instant pot, give them that definition, the real definition, right?
The true carnitas, absolutely.
Go for it.
So tonkotsu translates to pork bone. Broth, and then the word ramen actually just translates to wheat noodle. So you have many different kinds of ramen. Tonkotsu is one specific kind of ramen, and that refers to one that's made with a pork bone. It can be a clear broth or a cloudy broth. In ramen terminology, a chintan is a clear soup, which you could make with pork bones and it would still technically be a tonkotsu. But the tonkotsu that we in America are very familiar with is a paitan, or a creamy emulsified soup. So all of that fat, the collagen, has all been blended together to create this really thick body. And then carnitas, for those of you that have been pressure cooking it for some reason. It's kind of like this hybrid confit/fry with your pork, right? You're going to have, in our case, and I think in the case of any true rancho, you're going to break down a whole pig. You'll have lots of different cuts they're going to be throwing into lard.
Carnitas is like the whole.
It's the whole pig, right? And if you're truly doing it right, which we do, you have a mother lard that you use over and over and over again, right? Because if you're truly out on the rancho, you only have so much lard to work with.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
then you're going to be, reusing it. But, we throw in bay leaf, Mexican Coca-Cola, garlic, clove, cinnamon. And, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but the sugars in the Coke you start with this braise process essentially, and eventually the liquid from the Coke evaporates, and then the sugars that are left behind from the Coke start to fry and caramelize onto the pork, and that's how you get that deep, rich amber color. So we do that fresh every morning. Right? Wow. In the shop, we make our carnitas fresh. We use pork shoulder for that classic pulled pork fibrous feel. We use buche or pork stomach, which is one of my favorite meats.
Buche,
I'm an organ meat guy. I think their textures are so much more interesting than fibrous cuts of meat.
Yeah,
so much more.
Buche, man, it's you don't see it a lot. Like
I force people to get it.
Further you go from the border, the less buche, and the more bullshit you get.
Yeah, no, 100%. And like, I really, really, again, like organ meats, their textures are so much more interesting. And for me, I feel like you get a lot of people telling you, you have to serve what the people want. You have to you have to cater to certain expectations. I'm like, no, you're eating pork stomach in this bowl of ramen. When we first launched the store, I actually had like carnitas sencillas and mixtas. You could get shoulder only.
Right.
Both for logistic reasons and pride reasons. I said, nah, y'all are eating the stomach. I'm not going to do this. Because also, I think, again, as Ramen Del Barrio's game has improved, one aspect of it is the carnitas. Maybe I didn't feel as strong about my carnitas back in the day. And I was like, when you mix it all together, the fats and the collagen from the buche and cuerito provide moisture back to that pork shoulder if I feel like I haven't cooked it quite right.
Right.
So mixing that all together just provides this better, juicier experience.
Yeah.
At this point, it doesn't matter how it's done, but I'm still making you eat all of it. And that third one is the cueritos, the skins.
Cueros.
Yeah, you gotta do it, right?
Yep.
I saw this one taqueria, maybe out in California. I'm sure this is done all over the place, but just taking a slab of cuero as the tortilla for a taco de carnitas.
Oh, okay, as a tortilla.
Just meat on meat.
That's it, meat on meat. That's all you need, fat on fat.
I'm sure it's not good for you, but I am a glutton for heavy flavors, and I know I couldn't do it, but I would do it. I would eat that for sure.
You're gonna need a lot of like escabeche to cut that fat down.
A lot of fat. You're gonna need some acidity there for sure.
Yeah. Love it. So what other? So you start with like your staple. I would assume it would be the carnitas
tonkotsu,
right?
Yeah. Just because it's really, it's representing both cultures right away. It is the closest thing we have to a true Japanese bowl of ramen with that clean, creamy white broth. That allows us to showcase right away, hey, there's nothing wrong with birria ramen coming from food trucks. It's a delicious evolution of Mexican cuisine into the fast casual environment. But that's not what we're doing. This is what we're doing. And it's its core, it's Japanese, right? We are taking it seriously, and then we are providing Mexican flavors and purpose for being around that.
Right. And then some lean more Japanese and some lean more Mexican.
Absolutely, right? Yeah. So whereas because not everybody eats menudo. A natural evolution for that bowl.
It's an acquired taste.
It is.
If you didn't start like young, after the quinceañeras and the bodas, it definitely is an acquired taste.
Yeah, the honeycomb tripe is an acquired taste and texture, right? Not everybody's down for what I love about organ meats is that springy chew.
You don't have to chew it. You just let it slide down that throat.
Hopefully they didn't cut it too big if we're going to go that way. But, because not everybody eats menudo, a very natural evolution of that bowl to kind of the more available platform was the pozole tonkotsu.
Oh, yes.
Right, because it's the same red guajillo base that we add to it, the same aroma chili oil that goes on top of the bowl. Essentially, all I really had to do was swap out the protein. And it also kind of works for us because ramen shops tend to be this large bulk prep program. It's a ton of prep and it's a ton of assembly. And then at the point of sales, it's just building the bowls really quickly, right?
Right.
Not you're not sautéing live in the moment. It's not a pan fried dish. It's assembly. All of the work comes on the back end.
Right.
So, in the United States, or sorry, I guess firstly in Japan, ramen shops tend to only serve one bowl of ramen, and they specialize in that.
Okay.
And then they're all hyper competitive with one another on who's doing this said dish the best.
Right.
In America, we love the illusion of choice.
Yeah.
So we have very large
Just
menus.
like you have a lot of choices in this menu right here.
Yeah, right. So, you have to, I don't know how many ramen shops in America. I'm sure the Japanese transplants are true to that. But most ramen shops that thrive in America tend to have multiple options on their menu. And we're not necessarily specializing so much as a traditional Japanese shop would because of that desirability. Everybody wants something different. You want to feel like you chose it for yourself. Maybe you weren't even just craving something specific to you.
Right.
So, for us, that means the pozole, the mole esquemen, the chilaquiles mixed noodle. All of these different dishes are options. But in that prep program of trying to have as many components that can be cross-utilized, I kind of came on the realization that our carnitas, this house-made fresh product, should be our interpretation for our chashu, right? You go to Tatsuya, every single bowl still has that. As long as it has chashu, it's the same chashu, right?
Yeah.
The miso may have ground pork, but...
And you're talking about ramen
Tatsuya here in Austin, right? Just something familiar that you guys can hop on, right? So essentially a ramen shop tends, if they're trying to get a large menu executed, they're going to try and find products that they can place across the menu. So, you typically have one chashu for your menu, unless you're truly putting in the effort to do different things, right?
Right.
For us, I don't know how many different ways we could interpret chashu into the Mexican platform. And for me, we're making these beautiful fresh carnitas every day.
Yeah.
I don't want to do like a little costilla or braised pork shoulder in the pozole. I think it makes so much more sense to just put that mound of beautiful carnitas right on top. And that's our chashu for it.
Okay, got
it. The menudo we still do on Sundays now, para la cruda, right?
Pues sí, siempre los domingos.
De lo que no te perdonó el sábado.
So, but you do have outside of ramen, you have ceviche, you have the tacos. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So again, right, I was mentioning that when you have a concept, the more you flesh out around it, the more credible it is. And that's particularly important with a fusion concept, because now you're not just trying to say, oh, we're doing this traditional food, here it is, and then simply gauge it by how well it was replicated and produced. When you get into a fusion concept, you now have to prove to people that it actually makes sense and should exist, right?
Yeah.
Right? Because now it's a novelty, and you're also messing with people's cultures.
Sure.
Which is something that I've kind of tried to balance and deal with throughout this process, because, the worst thing you can do, I think probably anywhere, but in America, right, is, you have so many different people coming into a country with cultures that have been produced over centuries of suffering and pride and joy and sweat. And, if you see your culture butchered, it's probably going to offend you, and probably justly so. Yeah. So, we are dealing with this product that has to truly encompass as many facets of something as thoughtfully as possible. Yeah. So the more I reinforce the structure of the ramen with other fusion dishes around it, other aspects of the music, right? The overall vibe of Ramen Del Barrio is kind of a mix between a cantina and finding a Japanese ramen shop in some alleyway. Dimly lit, warm, comforting, rustic vibes. And all of it should reflect that. So the other aspects of the menu, whether it's the tacos or the tostadas or the aguachiles, they all have fusion in some form. The tacos, we call yaki tacos, right? We essentially use Japanese robata grilling. We use binchotan as this kind of Japanese charcoal. And we essentially make skewers and we grill them over this charcoal. They have different glazes and toppings to go on top of them. And then they all land eventually on a soft corn tortilla. Different toppings as well, right? All of that. And then we deliver it to the customer as is, and then they simply pull the skewer out, and you have this taco combining Japanese grilling techniques. So you get this beautiful sear, smoky flavors, and we involve, true Japanese grilling techniques. So we have a tare, which translates, or tare in Japanese translates to seasoning liquid of sorts. That can apply to both ramen or grilling. So, multiple tares throughout our shop, but a tare for yakitori or grilling sake is kind of going to be like a sweet soy glaze braise. You dip your skewers into it, and then they go on the grill. They kind of caramelize and they adhere, and then you dip it a few more times. So we do our tare has like piloncillo in it, the Mexican brown cane sugar, right?
Totally.
So that adds a really nice rustic note to it right there that you can pick up on right away. But all of the meats tend to be things that braise really well.
Okay.
Because then the idea is, you have this tortilla and skewer in hand. And if you're trying to pull that skewer out, it has to fall out. It has to fall off, right? So the braised lengua, sous vide octopus, braised pork belly, all of those things work really well. And then on the seafood side of things, really for me, if you want to get into like Japanese seafood, it's about simplicity and detail and just letting the seafood do the work. And then Mexican aguachiles and ceviche are much more vibrant, but at the same time, they always say pica. Que te pique,
sí, que te pique,
pero igual.
But you gotta say, no pica. So that way they'll order it.
The seafood still has to shine, right? And that's still the case for mariscos in Mexico. A huge inspiration for me. Because even though I grew up in Isla Mujeres, which is off of the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula, so we have a lot of beautiful fresh fish and seafood. The ceviches there tend to be very simple, and also that's also kind of implying the homegrown. Ceviche is not necessarily the fancy restaurant ones, but ceviche I'm familiar with where I'm from in Mexico is very much kind of like acidulated fish and pico de gallo mixed together, right? Right? But if you go to like Baja California and you get into the aguachiles, then it's spicy, you've got so many different sauces going on, the green, the red, the negro, all of those different things. So in Mexico City, there's a fantastic restaurant, Mi Compa Chava. And they are doing Sonora and Baja style mariscos at an incredibly high level. And, they bring in bluefin tuna. And they're breaking them down in the shop like they're a freaking Japanese restaurant or something. So they're going the extra mile. And that to me was a huge inspiration. So the Ramen Del Barrio take on the seafood thing is simply Japanese quality sashimi products using the Mexican delivery platform, which is tostadas and aguachiles, right? So just finding ways to let the seafood shine, which is the Japanese doctrine, and then finding the more fun and playful ways of the casual beach day in Mexico with some aguachiles.
With a coronita.
Not yet, because I can't serve alcohol in my. I can't wait.
That's true.
It is a misdemeanor to consume alcohol in my building.
Oh, okay.
I have to tell people that.
Don't drink there, people. But you can slurp all day, right?
You can slurp and just bring an unmarked container.
There you go. So like, the complexity and the way you describe the foods, everything that you're serving, the blending. I mean, I'm not surprised. You got the Michelin guide,
the bib,
right? Yeah. What does that mean? Like, how did you find out, and what was that experience like?
It was. I think in early October, I got an email from somebody and a message from someone, the same person over Instagram, saying that they needed pictures, that they were with the Michelin guide, and that we were in consideration. And I was like, every chef friend I've ever spoken to says it's completely, silent, that they don't tell you anything. So I'm like, is this a scam? Am I being, am I being messed with? Like, because they wanted me to click a link to submit the photos. I'm like,
is it legit?
I've been told not to click links.
Don't give them your bank account number.
But I don't remember how. I think I just actually contacted like the Michelin guide. Like the person was like, "Oh no, you can contact this number. You'll verify." Okay. So we sent them a bunch of pictures. And then in November, when the first guide came out, they invited us to Houston for this big gala. I bought a suit the morning of the event because I had never had a suit for anything before. That's funny. And I got to see a lot of people from Austin, from all over Texas, and it was really, really cool to get that award. And obviously, we're all shooting for the star. And that's still my goal for my brick and mortar, because I know that the food that we serve, if supported by the right environment, you're not in an old, quaint Asian market with some suspicious smells sometimes. If you can truly like encompass Ramen Del Barrio in its own space, I know what it's worth. But the Bib Gourmand is an incredible honor. And
have you seen an uptick since?
So I'm gonna say yes, but it was really funny because we came. The ceremony was on a Monday, and we're closed Monday, Tuesdays. So I come back from Houston Wednesday, and that same Monday, it dropped like 30 degrees.
Oh, dang.
So busy season hit regardless. I don't know exactly what uptake. I'm sure it's significant.
Yeah.
But like for me, it was just like, oh, the Bib Gourmand. Oh, the busy season's here. Time to go. It was just one big, like inventory had to be increased by 30 to 40%, like out of nowhere. And it was like,
I think you're right next to that Asian mart.
Yeah. It's
I'm
very
sure you sources elsewhere, but
it's very forgiving for my dried goods. Right? If I need soy sauce, sugar, salt, MSG, all of those things.
Right.
Even cilantro, because their produce is still coming in fresh, right? But all of my bulk meats I get from a larger company.
You mentioned MSG, like part of, a couple of things come up for me that there's a lot of like people's perception of certain food that they may not be used to.
Yeah.
Like for me, when I walk into a taqueria, it smells like amazing, right?
Yeah.
The cebollas
Sure.
and the chiles roasting where it makes you cry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like when my mom toasts some chiles and everybody's crying at the house. Actually, that's my job now. My kids. And so, or even when you go to, maybe a traditional ramen shop, there's a lot of like
pork smells.
Yeah,
smells like pork.
Pork.
Yeah.
Right. And then this idea around MSG. Tell me about like some of those things that maybe you have to introduce people to, right? Like this new concept of like, for a long time, I think white people were like, MSG is bad for you. But that, Asians have been using that for Japanese folks have been using it for centuries.
Yeah. So MSG, it's as monosodium glutamate. It's technically a naturally occurring ingredient or component of many things. It's essentially umami manifest. You can find it in tomatoes, mushrooms, things like that. What you get at the store is just a synthesized, commercially produced extract or concentration of that.
Yeah.
And I think there's two arguments to be had that people kind of get confused on. Is one is the health aspect of it. I've heard a lot of, essentially, I'll call them chef's tales as opposed to wives' tales. But like, I've had people
I like that.
I've had like certain people explain to me that it's essentially it's like a racist understanding of it, that like Chinese restaurants back in the day would in San Francisco and New York would pop up and people would go home feeling sick and tired. But ultimately it was just from how much sodium is in the food in general that just makes you drowsy and stuff like that. And a lot of people
they never say that about turkey.
People, I remember MSG is an integral part of ramen. From the most basic ramen shop to the most intricate, they all are most likely and should be using MSG.
Yeah.
And that kind of ties back into the second argument about MSG, which is it a cheat? Is it lazy for a chef to use? Because I had this conversation with a friend of mine. He's like, no, MSG is just cheating. You're just adding umami into it without actually developing the flavors naturally. And I said, okay, let's do this. Produce your dish.
Yeah.
With your expertise.
Sure.
With your perfection, develop the most incredible flavors that can be naturally developed. And then add MSG to it. And it's still going to be a little better.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
Right? So as a chef, I think it's just we have tools at our disposal to produce food with. And who am I to say that I'm too good to use MSG?
Yeah.
I'm still boiling my soup overnight. I'm still working 12 to 18-hour days. MSG makes my food taste better.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, exactly. And there's nothing wrong with all those like the strong pungent smells.
No.
Because at the end of the day, it's going to be some good, delicious food that you're going to
Absolutely,
eat, right? Yeah, and you got to be open and curious to explore some of this, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Like, have you been to a meat market or a mercado, in Mexico or even down the border?
Yep.
Like you can smell
Absolutely.
everything.
So, I've been to meat markets in Mexico, obviously. I've been to meat markets in Vietnam a number of times. And a lot of those places have very different styles of transportation, of moving product around. And more often than not, those animals were slaughtered that morning, and they don't need refrigeration because it's going to sell by the end of the day. It's just put out either on ice or not on ice. I mean, there's really hot places without refrigeration.
Yeah.
That meat's going to sell that day, and but throughout the day, it's hot.
Yeah,
and it can smell like a slaughterhouse sometimes. It's definitely something that I think becomes it's as menudo is an acquired taste, the mercado can be an acquired smell.
That's true.
I think it takes time to adjust to, and I think ultimately, if the market smells bad to you, you're just soft.
Yeah.
You just gotta,
harden up a little bit.
And there's this cross between like fish that's going bad on ice and fish that's intentionally being sun dried and smells stinky and sweet. Like dried salt in the ocean, right? So there, you just have to be exposed to them long enough to kind of get used to them. I'm sure when I was like, I grew up in Isla, which is a very, very contained part of Mexico.
Yeah.
And my parents owned a restaurant working 7 days a week. Didn't have a lot of time to travel to other parts of Mexico. I got to go to Veracruz once with a friend. Mérida, all of Yucatan, a lot of Quintana Roo and stuff like that. But it took me to get to 18 years to have my own free will to kind of explore other parts. I've now been down to Juarez and Mexico City.
Yeah.
But, I was in a very contained touristic part of Mexico growing up as a gringo learning Spanish down there.
Right.
So I there were things that are kind of like I did have to adjust to and I did have to grow a stomach for. But now that I've done so, I'm like, man, y'all are soft. I just think I'm better now.
We just need to explore, be open to the exploration.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where those smells take
us,
right?
Yeah. My parents are probably considerably less adventurous with like their organ meat than I am.
Okay.
For me, actually, I dated a Vietnamese girl for 4 years, and that's how I ended up in Vietnam. But like, she opened my mind to like so many different foods, and that was a huge thing. Just like going to Chinese restaurants, Vietnamese restaurants, shrimp paste. One of the funkiest things you will ever come across. Or there's a dish in Japanese bar food called shiokara, and that's squid marinated in its own guts, and it's just little slivers of squid in this kind of yellow goo, and when you put it in your mouth right away, it tastes like the stinkiest French cheese of your life. But then the taste that follows is kind of like death. And ammonia. It's
an acquired taste.
It's an acquired taste.
Yeah.
You sip it with the beer. It's very much your izakaya or tavern food.
Okay, got it. So when somebody comes to Ramen Del Barrio, give us kind of like this explanation of what they can smell and see and hear as they come into your shop.
Yeah. Loud music for sure, drowning out everything else as best I can to make you forget that you're in a market. You're going to smell some chili oils. You mentioned burning chiles. Our habanero firebomb. We're roasting habaneros on open flame back there, so we're all crying.
I'm not crying, you're crying.
You're gonna find definitely pork smells. I think the grill is something that picks up the most because of the way the smoke carries its aromas. And that's not something you expect coming into a ramen shop, but because we have that binchotan grill back there with the sweet soy, charring on the grill grate. The al pastor marinade, the orange juice in that, and the achiote burning up onto the plancha as well. Like all of that is going to be what you smell right away. It does smell good in there.
Yeah, and you can hear it too.
Yeah, it's loud. It's busy.
Loud. It's busy.
It's busy in there.
You jam out to some old school Molotov and Slurpee.
I think for me, like the music is one of the elements that I love to be hands-on with the most. So at this point, I love to share creative freedom with my team whenever it's available. And I think for me, like having either like other chefs that have been trained professionally in Japanese cuisine, or because it's the Latino workforce, you get a lot of Mexicans come in. I have had a number of Mexican cooks come in over the years and provide me with like incredible insight and recipes. There's a guy you may know them, but Luis Gamez. They own their family owns a taqueria over on in the Montopolis area. I can't remember the name of it, and I'm so sorry, Luis. But one of the best cooks I've met, as far as like home cooked Mexican food, because he learned from his tias and his abuelitas and his mom, and just the insight that brings in right away is awesome for me.
Love it, love it. No, so okay, right now you're in North Austin. You are a destination. So people go there, right?
Yeah.
So, but as well as what's next? What's next after that shop? Are you looking to do something different?
So the first thing that I would really like to do, and we're getting closer and closer to it, is a brick and mortar. I've outgrown the space, which is an incredible blessing to be able to say, but we've outgrown that space. We can do up to the most bowls I've ever done in regular hours is like 336 bowls of ramen in one day, and that's being open for like 7 hours.
Wow.
So it's a very, very, very busy, packed period of time in a small kitchen. The market's owners, my landlords, are very gracious to allow me to use some of their walk-in space for my bones, because I go through like 800 pounds of pork feet a week, and I can't actually store that in my kitchen.
Yeah.
So, they've been very gracious to kind of like help me along the way with the growth that I've had, because it's truly not sustainable in the true space that I'm renting.
Yeah.
So I have, a lot of room to expand on. And another thing that we touched on is alcohol.
Yeah.
Is I can't serve it right now. The market itself has a license for distribution but not consumption on premise. So essentially it's kind of like cracking one open at the gas station or HEB. You just can't do it, right?
Yeah.
So Ramen Del Barrio, food-wise, is already kind of this hybrid izakaya. And izakaya translates to a gastropub, right? Small bites, shareables, drinks, a social eating experience that goes on throughout the night. For Ramen Del Barrio, your starters are going to be your tacos, your ceviches, your aguachiles, right?
Yeah.
And then you finish on your ramen. Maybe we have like 1 or 2 desserts available, either like a matcha tres leches.
Oh, yeah.
Or, I thought about for a while, the mochi ice cream balls?
Yeah.
The tropical fruit ones. You have like the mango. We could just make chamoy in-house and just dip it halfway in that, and then leave it on a plate with like a bamboo leaf underneath it. Really simple things. Because I'm not a pastry guy. I can't bake for nothing.
I know where you can get some chamoy though.
Yeah. So ultimately, Ramen Del Barrio in its brick and mortar becomes an izakaya once we have that drinking. A ramen shop tends to be a very quick turn and burn operation when you're serving just the one dish.
Right.
And especially the tradition there is in Japan, you have these very small shops, limited seating. The chef needs to turn covers in order to turn a profit to keep the lights on. So you're going to keep those seats moving. You're expected to leave as soon as you're done eating. In America, we are very leisurely with our time. You want to sit down, have a more social eating experience, which is the norm here. So, that's kind of okay with us because we already have more than ramen.
Sure.
We increase our guest check average, the average amount that a customer spends, by having these appetizers, these shareables that are just as intriguing to the customer as the ramen is, because of the fusion element that, your typical bowl of ramen may cost you from $14 to $17. And then you may get a drink on top of that. That's that ticket that you need to turn really quickly because they've only spent about $21 or so. Right. But for us, because we have all of these shareables and appetizers, the guest check goes up. Enjoy your time.
Enjoy your time, right?
And that's where the izakaya truly comes into play for us, because I want both. I want Mexican and Japanese beer.
Yeah.
I would love to have like a whiskey program from Japan because they excel at that.
Yeah.
I would love to have a mezcal program from Mexico.
Yeah.
And then you can do agua frescas that you can spike with sake and stuff like that, right?
Love that.
Or your yuzu jalapeno margarita, or sake in your Jamaica or horchata, whatever the case may be. So many different options, and it's just one more element of like what Ramen Del Barrio needs to be to truly flesh out that concept.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're really kind of taking kind of your own creativity and taking it to the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's kind of like 2 ways to approach food as far as creating or choosing to represent something. And you can either kind of honor time-old traditions, essentially replication, right? Say, I'm going to open a traditional dim sum restaurant, dumplings, and I'm going to perfect the folds, the fillings, the steaming techniques, all of that, and I'm just opening an authentic traditionalist dim sum restaurant. And that's a beautiful experience, and arguably it's what takes more time to master because you're making someone else's food, and you have to make it to their standard.
Sure.
And they cared about it just as much as you do, if not more, because they invented it. Like, it's their product. So to replicate is essentially, I actually do respect it as the higher and more difficult art form of cooking, is to make three abuelitas, back,
Yeah.
carnitas as good as they made it.
Right.
That's probably really, really hard to do.
Yeah, of course.
Or you can put your own spin on it
Sure.
and use your own creativity and honor tradition, but also do something new with it for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I argue probably it's easier to do that because that means you're forsaking rules.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's harder because then you have to be a truly creative person.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, you have to actually be able to flesh these things out in a sensible way. Because speaking honestly, there's a lot of really crappy fusion out there, right? Fusion isn't just, slapping one thing on top of the other.
Yeah.
It's building it from the ground up and that it makes sense to do so.
Yeah. So what do you think about that word fusion?
It kind of defines my life to an extent, right? I had like the inverse immigrant experience. I moved to Mexico from a really young age. I learned English at home and Spanish at school. So I have zero beef with the word fusion as long as it's done thoughtfully because I want, in my own case, I'm not, it's really, really hard to not offend. And I've kind of, when I grew up in Mexico, I had probably the same experience that immigrants would have here, getting the crap beaten out of you because you look different or you're not as social or don't even know the language yet. Like the first words I learned was por favor, güey. Deja de rajarme la madre, güey. Like, please stop beating me up, right? Some of the first things I learned. But I kind of for a long period of time, I kind of rejected Mexican culture because I felt attacked by it. I was plucked from my elementary or preschool back in the States, go to Mexico. I don't speak their language. Some kids are really, really nice to me, but some kids are really, really mean to me. And I don't even have the language skills to ask them why they're being mean to me other than pinche gringo, right? That's what it boils down to. So I rejected Mexican culture as part of me for a very long time. And at 18, I was, trying to figure out where I was going to go to college. It could have been like Wadi in Merida or UNAM in Mexico. I barely probably even had the grades to get into those places. But my parents actually met two teachers from ACC at a bar in Isla. And they were like, well, come check out Austin.
Okay.
So I did. And I came here and the number of events that had to like fall into place for me to be here are ridiculous. But I come to Austin, I said I wanted to leave Mexico, and of all the places I chose Texas. Right.
That's fine. Which was Mexico before, right?
Exactly.
So here's how
I barely left.
So here's my last question for you. If you had to describe it, Ramen Del Barrio as a taco, what kind of taco would that be?
It would be a taco de carnitas with a salsa roja de chile japonés.
Okay.
It would have it had eel sauce on it, and it would have chicharrón furikake.
Nice.
And that's what I brought to the Taco Fest in Dallas just a few days ago, right? So furikake is this essentially like a mix of different crispy, crunchy elements. Traditionally, you would sprinkle it on your rice or something in Japanese food. It could be nori, bonito, crispy garlic, all of those things. We make one in-house by crushing chicharrones and folding it with all of those Japanese elements together. You get this beautiful, smoky, fishy, porky, crunchy, crispy mix. And it goes beautifully on the carnitas taco because chicharrón already gets crushed onto carnitas tacos sometimes. So it works really well. Eel sauce, a little sweetness. It's really good.
Well, Chris, it's been such a pleasure having you on. And,
thank you.
Thanks so much for sharing, going a little bit deeper around like both cultures, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? Sure. And it shows that you have kind of the trust and you honor both traditions.
Thank you.
Kind of what you're doing with your craft. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
We'll see you out there.
Awesome.